Hi. Some of my clients say, Christopher, you write these health updates now that you're 5 years into your recovery, but I have a bit of a hard time relating to them because you're doing so great all the time. What was year one like? Do you have anything about that? Well, that's a great question, and no, I didn't write anything about that. But it was awful. Every second of that was cruel and unusual what I went through. Here are some photos showing what I used to look like during that period of time. I was 100 pounds heavier. I was 3 inches shorter. I was on 15 different prescription medications, and I was in so much pain. I was never below a 6. It was always interfering with my thinking. I had countless symptoms. My mind was racing at all times. I even had trouble articulating full sentences. And whenever I say my pain was never below a 6, it was commonly in the 8, 9 range, where it was truly mind stopping, where I just couldn't do much of anything. It would interrupt every bit of my thinking, every movement. It was always there. I never got a break from it. Even I was so hypersensitive back then to all sight and sound that TV was hurting me a lot, and the sun was just agonizing to go out in. I had about 3 hours every morning where I was unable to function due to what I referred to as the bowel movement cycle, where if I had to go at all, it would flare me up and just my innards would be on fire for several hours where I thought I can't do much of anything but just be here in a chair sitting still. And that lasted about 2 hours after each meal, which was only twice a day. I also was stuck only being able to sleep on my right side back then. I had this vibration in my left temple that would influence my gut, so I couldn't roll onto that side at all. If I did in the night, I would wake up and it would just cause this bizarre throbbing sensation. There was some other weirdness too. I would lose hearing in my left ear when I turned my head. That's just one of the countless symptoms that I had where I think a lot of them were medication side effects, but my body was just so busted for being chronically ill for that long. I mean, it started whenever I was 16 years old, and at that point I was 37, so that was 21 years at that point. And the severe stuff started whenever I was 26, so there was a whole lot of badness. There was also a lot of time in the bathroom and lots of Charlie horses at wake up. I would continually wake up, and that would be the first thing that happened would just be, okay, 8, 9 pain immediately whenever I'd wake up. So it was really, truly awful. Mentally, I was driven by a lot of fear, but some good things too. I definitely thought that there was a way to improve because I was doing basically nothing right and knew there were all these lifestyle change type things that could work, but I wasn't doing them. So I knew there was some way that I'd feel a little bit better, but I had no idea about how much. So I thought it would be foolish to think of something like a cure or reversal or remission of autoimmune disease because I was so far gone. I was in so much pain all the time. It was just completely unrealistic. And there wasn't a lot of pleasure either. Even though I was focusing on values and the things that I was doing that was better, I just didn't get very intense pleasure from anything because there was the interfering factor of all the pain and depression, and I just couldn't feel very good about anything. I was also learning to have time of nothingness because I was coming from a place where, as those worst few years, where I stayed away from the symptoms and pain as much as I could by staying busy. I was either doing something or thinking, just in this kind of frenzied mode all the time. So I had to start repeating to myself, it's okay to be overwhelmed by pain and symptoms. There was so much of that in the first year of trying to just say that to myself and realize that I was in this avoidance behavior, and that's not the same thing as distraction, which is a big thing for pain. And I really had to learn the difference of running away from things versus just getting my mind off of it. It was a totally different way to think of it. And one of the things I did to ground myself with a baseline was this exercise called 5 Bright Spots I got from Gene Maroney. And here are my 5 bright spots. This is 5 things that I was going to do no matter what on a day, no matter how bad I felt. So I had some kind of stability and something to build from, just to establish some bit of a value-based context that, hey, there's some good stuff here. So number 1 was talking with my mom for at least 30 minutes. Number 2 was watching at least one Bollywood song video, because there are so many uplifting moments in those that just would give me a little bit of pleasure in just seeing other people enjoying themselves and reminding myself I'm part of this species, because I didn't feel like I was anymore. That really helped to see that. And the third was an hour of a video game. At the time, at the very beginning, I was playing XCOM Enemy Within. I still remember that. I could almost manage to get through one map because I was playing on a really hard difficulty. It was turn-based and slow, so that was good for my nervous system, which was so overwhelmed. Number 4 was reading 30 minutes before bed in darkness, except for just the faintest light, and in silence too. And I was reading Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes back then. Number 5 was a 10-minute slow indoor walk, and I'm talking geriatric speed, just almost barely moving inside. And at the end of it, I would do 3 Qigong moves to try and get my nervous system a little more stable and to feel like I was doing something physically, since I was coming from nothing. And unfortunately, I even had to back down on some of these things even more during morphine withdrawal to get things even more basic. Another mindset-based thing that I was really working on was naming the beneficial things I was doing versus just thinking I was doomed or this wasn't going in the right direction, just so that I could have some basis of seeing things are getting a little bit better. I'm doing something at the very least, even if I don't feel better on a daily basis. And that was a big one. And one of the things of critical importance I was doing was I was addressing at least one thing in all 6 of what I refer to as the core categories of that carry over into lifestyle medicine and into functional medicine sort of areas. And that's diet and supplementation, stress management, exercise, sleep and sunshine, and then things to reduce your environmental toxin exposure, and of course medication reduction. So I'll just break down each one of those that I made sure I was doing as this part of this foundational protocol for myself. I was doing an autoimmune variant of the paleo diet that Chris Kresser recommended in the Paleo Cure. And I also was doing a supplement fast. I had been on so many supplements for such a long time that I thought I'm just going to try and get everything out of my system. So really, that first part of my recovery was without anything. I certainly used plenty of them after that, though. I was doing deep breathing, but I had no idea how to go about that at the time. Sometimes I would do it for 2 straight hours because I thought, oh, this is really helping. But then I would feel worse because I was inactive for so long. Whenever I snapped out of it, I'd feel like I was in a flare-up from having done it. So I didn't know what the boundaries were on that and how I could help myself with it. And then I was going from sitting all day, sometimes over 30 hours a day while I was awake during those periods of the days that were up to 40 hours there in that last year of the worst of it. So I would just make myself stand, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes an hour. I couldn't really figure out the balance at first, so I just swung all over the place and the symptoms were up and down, so I didn't have the clearest method. It hadn't really fallen into place for me yet, how I had to carefully manage this with all the fluctuations. And I made sure I was walking at least 1,000 steps, which is not very much. That's like 10 minutes of decent speed walking for a normal person. But I started pushing that up and got that up to about 3,000 there during that first year. Later on, it was closer to like 6,000, but that was much later in the year. And then I made sure I'd wind down in silence for a few hours to try and establish a better bedtime, since I just spun around the clock previously, and this worked really well. I also changed my personal care stuff to cut down to minimal ingredients because I had so many sensitivities. Like if I got olive oil or coconut oil or avocado oil on my hands, they would just burn like mad. It would be acute kind of pain. I had to get it off of me. So that was something else that I was addressing. And then I was kind of in this frenzy, since I thought that maybe the medications were the big problem, that I was just cutting off of them as fast as I could. And I was off half of them within 6 months, which in retrospect was a bit too fast. One of the other critical breakthroughs I had in the first year was figuring out some of the connections between symptoms and triggers, because I would have this nerve flare-up every single day, and I finally realized it was because I was sitting too long, and I was so overweight that my belly overhung and would just create this pocket of heat along my waistline that would flare up my interstitial cystitis. So that's one of the reasons why standing up became such a huge thing for me, was that not only was it helping me to get on my feet and be a little more active, it was avoiding the pain trigger that was spooling me up every single day. So that was a big one. And I was figuring out tons of other ones along the way too, because you have to really figure out what the heck am I doing that might be pushing this up. Because if you're doing something even half the day that's causing your symptoms go up, then you're gonna have a really hard time trying to get better. So you gotta figure out those causes. So I was doing the lifestyle changes and then some functional medicine side of things with supplements on a protocol I designed for myself after I'd looked at some tests. And then I was doing the mindset work around the clock, but I hadn't found anything about the last part of my core method now, which is neuroscience, because I hadn't met Dr. Lemons yet. That was almost 10 months into the start of my recovery whenever I finally met him, a former Mayo Clinic doctor who helped me so much. Whenever I was in his program, suddenly all the pieces started to fit into place, and I realized this is really a method that's going to help with so many things that I've been dealing with. I had no idea it was going to be this effective at the time because I was just starting out. But that's whenever I really shot ahead, is once I started integrating the neuroscience things. But there were still a lot of gray areas about how to fill it in, how to implement it. And everywhere I looked, I couldn't find anybody doing anything like this. So that's whenever I thought I should go into business around this. Once my recovery was far enough along, I realized I'm really got something here. This is really helping me, and it can help other people. It's helping Dr. Lemons' clients, but I've added in all these other things on the mindset and lifestyle side of things and the functional medicine that I thought, well, let's write a book together, Dr. Jim. This makes a whole lot of sense, and we can help a lot of people. I want to leave you with some things that you can take away from my story to implement into your journey for starting out, because the first year can be really, really rough depending on where you're coming from. It is always the hardest at the very beginning of a healing journey. It's possible to get through horrible circumstances when you have the right method. You've got to have a comprehensive approach that addresses everything major that's going on at once, get to the root causes of all the dysfunction in order for things to really improve. And this method that I've come up with, it could have sped everything up. Had I figured it out sooner and all the little nuances to it, I'm sure I could have shaved a couple of years off things at the very least, because there was a lot of trial and error leading to flare-ups and just missteps. I invested a lot of time in some of the wrong options. And as for the method, I've shot another video on that, so look for that down in the description of this video. Secondly, I wish that I knew that a recovery like mine was possible at the beginning, because that would have been huge for my stress levels. There were so many, I don't know, maybe, can I get better? And how much? I can't possibly think I'll get pain-free. And if anybody has read my latest health update on my website for the 5-year anniversary, I just now made a pain-free goal, because I think it's finally reasonable to make that assumption. It sure looks like I'm right on that. But the biochemistry of the stress, all the inflammation from the cortisol, the catecholamines, all sorts of things that are firing all the time with those nagging doubts of wondering, am I ever going to be whole again? So if I had known that there was a way to get this much better, it would have sped things up a great deal. And that's why I start my clients out with my option 1 service, the health consultation, because I want them to see how many resources there are out there that can help them, even whenever they feel like they're really stuck, because I know this mind side of the healing is so important that you're going to start getting endorphins, you're going to start getting all sorts of other good biochemicals whenever you're feeling better about your prospects. You're going to be less inflamed. So that was the second thing that I wish I'd known. The third and final thing I want to leave you with is that first part of your recovery can be very difficult to get going. It's going to take a lot of fortitude and the best within your spirit to push through, because sometimes those better moments are just not going to come unless you make the changes during the difficult times when the pain is up there. Like with me, it would never go below a 6. I couldn't wait for a better time, so I really had to push through. And this is where I urge you that if you can, to get some support, because it can make this journey so much easier. And it's the primary reason why I opened my business with my option 2 service, to do health coaching, to be there as part of the ongoing support team across weeks and months if needed, to be there to help remind you of what's good about you, because it can get so dark, and to help you make the plans to not have the flare-ups and not have as many slip-ups as you might have. Don't give up. You can get better. If you want to hear how much can be overcome, I suggest listening to the full version of my story in the interview that I did with Michael Rossline for the Natural Evolution podcast season 1. I'll put a link in the description to those 2 episodes. Thanks for watching. If you found this video valuable, please like it and subscribe to my channel for more content like this.